Professor Wes Porter. We're talking about introduction to criminal law and specifically the parts of crimes before we get to substantive crimes. We're talking about the parts of crimes. This is mens rea, which is the mind, the guilty mind, the mental state that's required for most crimes. And almost every crime that comes out in statute nowadays, whereas most jurisdictions have penal codes, they have a requisite mens rea that is often paired up with the actus, the act that we've talked about in a previous video. We still have strict liability crimes, sometimes those welfare and trying to police different things that just make sure thou shall not, and whether you had a guilty mind or not is not important. But for the most part, the crimes that we study this course, we'll talk about mens rea having some type of guilty mindset, having some morally blameworthy mindset at the time where you're committing the crime. And one way to think about that is in the inverse. That is, there really are no accidental crimes. If it's truly an accident, that's a defense to a crime. We're talking about people that intended it or at least have some type of guilty mindset, even if it's criminal negligence, that type of thing. So some type of morally blameworthy, some type of guilty mindset that goes along with the actus of a crime. So here are the different parts of crimes. Again, we've talked about actus rea already. We've talked about it in the form of conduct crimes and result crimes. Especially those result crimes will often involve an issue of causation, where we're talking about how that result is connected up by whatever act they took forward with that guilty mindset. And again, at the end of the course, we'll talk about without justification or excuse some of the other defenses other than there's always a defense of essentially there's no intent here, or the intent required is not satisfied. The government has not proved its case. That's always a defense available to the criminal defendant. And here's kind of the common law. There's about 1 million adverbs that could make their way into different criminal statutes. But at common law, we generally went in this progression. Someone did something intentionally, someone did something knowingly, and then we essentially went to kind of risk-taking mens rea, which involved recklessly and negligently. So if you look at them quickly, intentionally really means that I was trying to bring about this result. If I did so intentionally, it was my conscious desire to cause this harm. If I intentionally acted, if I intentionally struck, if I intentionally took, I was trying to do that. It was my conscious desire, and I'm virtually certain if it's a result crime, I'm virtually certain that it's going to bring about that result. So if I take a 2x4 and I whack someone over the head and I intended to hit them with it, and then permanent bodily damage happens, I was virtually certain that that type of harm was going to come about with the act that I took. That's acting intentionally. Knowingly, we're really talking about being aware that it exists, consciously believing it exists. Not benefiting from a doctrine that we'll study called willful blindness, where essentially I'm purposely trying to not know. I'm putting my head in the sand. I'm la 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 and putting on blinders to make sure that I don't know something. As it relates to, especially at common law, as it relates to recklessly and negligently, I'm really evaluating the kind of this 3-part thing. What's the gravity of the harm with the action I'm taking? What's the probability of the harm with the action I'm taking? And is there a burden to me of not acting? Is there a cost to not acting? So sometimes, I might not intend to hurt anyone as I take my motorcycle and then I hop up on the sidewalk and I start going 60 miles an hour. I didn't intend to hurt anyone. I just wanted to take an alternate path in the road. But there's harm involved, especially if it's a busy area, especially if there's people known to be on that sidewalk. And if it's a busy street, if it's New York City, then there's a high probability of harm as I hop up onto the sidewalk and I'm going 60 miles an hour. And really, in most of these instances that we talk about someone acting recklessly or someone acting criminally negligently, there was no burden to me not acting. I could have stayed in the road. I could have done things the way they were supposed to do. So there was really no burden. No one forced me to jump up there. So we're evaluating sort of risk-taking in our guilty mindset with words like recklessly and negligently. Now, we'll spend a lot of time in this course looking at the model penal code. That's where you see the initials MPC. And the model penal code is, something that a bunch of smart people got together and decided different ways that we can define crimes, different ways that we can define parts of crimes like mens rea. And there's a number of states that have adopted the model penal code, at least parts of it, to serve as part of their penal code. So it's not just a hypothetical exercise. It's not just an academic exercise. The model penal code really serves to, either be the penal code for a jurisdiction or offer critical help and definitions and a statutory scheme for certain for certain jurisdictions. And they really talk about it in these four terms: purposely and knowingly and recklessly and negligently. And they define it, a little more cleanly than I would say it was handed to us at common law. Purposely is if you're doing something on purpose, what we would think about in common law as being intentionally. That's purposely. Knowingly, you're practically certain of the results, some similarity there. And then you can see we're really talking about I subjectively knew a risk and I subjectively chose to ignore a risk when I'm acting recklessly or to some degree negligently, being a little different than the negligence that we learn about in torts. So we're going to work through what is the mindset, what is the mens rea, what is the guilty mind, the morally blameworthy mindset that needs to be in place that goes along with not only the statutes we evaluate, but some of the common law crimes that we're going to make sure that we commit to memory for this course.